Hi, everybody. It's good to be with you. I'm back from the dead again. So the goal here is to keep the inspiration going. I'm going to continue to do these videos because I think it's important that we preserve our history here. So we will continue to preserve this important part of our national history. Now, tonight, what I've prepared here, and the title of this lecture is Edgar Fouche and the Secret of the TR-3B. Now, this whole concept of the TR-3B has been floating around ufology for 15 years now, minimum. I wanted to dive into the gentleman who really kicked this thing off, Edgar Fouche that you see off to the right here. And I want to give you the background of where I'm getting this information, how I got into this, what was donated to my collection, and give you the references so you can verify this on your own here. So again, Edgar Fouche and the Secret of the TR-3B. We'll do a quick check-in here. Occam's Razor, Catmaster Trash, looking forward to Michael. Chris Tyne, Hertz Zer, Third Phase of Moon. Okay, guys. Third Phase of Moon. Oh, I should point out that I was involved in Jim Goodall, and we had a few other people in his new Battle for Disclosure presentation that's available from the Cousin Brothers. So I want to give a shout out to them. Alex, Humberto, finally, I caught this live. Okay, well, I'm glad we're all here. Let's see where this goes. Now, this is going to be a deep dive into Edgar Fouche and the claims about this TR-3B. There's too much here to do in one pass. I've already kind of vetted out the details here, but we're going to do a part two. But today is part one, and I want to set all this up so that we have the background on this. And let me go to the next slide here. Special thanks to Dan Banker. So Dan, if you're around, thank you, brother. Thank you. Who donated Ed's original slides to my aerospace UFO historical archives. So what you see here on the left is the actual slide carousel that Edgar Fouche used back in his 1998 International UFO Congress presentation. When Dan donated the slides to my collection, I thought, let's scan those in at high resolution, and let's put this in a PowerPoint presentation, bring it up to 2024 standards, and let's delete the extraneous information, the redundant information. I found some things that were fragmented in his presentation, put that all together and include updated information, newspaper articles, brand new illustrations, and that's the result of this. Now, I've allowed to add his original link at the bottom here. So if anyone wants to follow along with Ed's original presentation, I've linked it at the bottom so you can verify what I'm talking about here. So just giving the background of where I got this information. All right, so a couple of quick bio points on Edgar here. He started out as a machinist making bombs for the U.S. Air Force, worked on projects for the Department of Defense for 25 years, was drafted into Vietnam conflict. 1967 to 1974, he worked at multiple Pacific bases. Expertise in intelligence, equipment, electronics, black programs, and cryptological applications. DoD factory representative. He was involved in engineering manager for multiple defense contractors on classified black programs, developing state-of-the-art electronic countermeasure systems. So this is kind of a brief background on what Edgar was involved in. Now, these are one of his original slides from his 1998 presentation. And this is just the type of work that he was involved in, electronic countermeasure applications. Let's continue on here. Edgar worked on multiple programs dating back to the 1970s, which are still classified. Edgar received over 4,000 hours of technical training from the U.S. government, which approximately half are classified. He spent 20 years working directly for the U.S. Air Force and the DoD. Let's continue on here. Edgar's involvement with stealth aircraft programs is still classified. So even to this day, some of the programs that he worked on involving low observable aircraft are still classified to this day. Edgar wrote the book Alien Rapture, The Chosen back in 1994 to 1995 with information he gathered about classified programs from a very small group of 5 close friends, which were test pilots, engineers, and investigators. So who made up the group of friends that helped Edgar write the book? Who were these people? Who were these people? Let's continue on here. So one of Edgar's contacts worked for the Department of Energy and the National Security Agency as an investigator and had years of experience at Area 51. He was also a TREAT team member, Tactical Reconnaissance Engineering Assessment Team. He monitored employees who had Q clearances at Nevada Test Site, Los Alamos, and Sandia National Labs. So interesting person to be involved in this book project. Very interesting. Let's go to the next slide here. The second friend worked directly for the National Security Agency in the field of electronics intelligence and became a defense contractor after retirement. So that's friend number 2. Another of Ed's contacts was a former SR-71 pilot and test pilot at Edwards Air Force Base. So this is friend number 3. Let's continue on here. The fourth friend joined Ed in the Vietnam War. The fifth friend was a DoD contractor and electronics engineer. He worked on top secret development programs involving ECM jammers and infrared receivers. Let's continue on. Additional information from the book came from 4 SR-71 pilots, 2 U-2 pilots, 1 TR-1 pilot, and approximately 24 fighter bomber pilots. So in totality, it was this whole group of engineers, intelligence professionals, pilots, who all came together to form this book project. So a lot of different sources here. Now, Ed met with his friends at the Silver Dollar Saloon in Las Vegas to formulate a plan to write a book which could preserve their experiences dealing with top secret classified programs while also protecting their identity and security. One of Ed's friends related to him an in-flight incident that occurred in the 1970s, which involved a ball of plasma that circled the SR-71 while he was flying at 74,000 feet in Mach 3. So if you look at this picture here, you've got this blackbird, and then you've got this plasma orb. Now, in the report, it said that it circled around this SR-71 at 74,000 feet at Mach 3, so that's 2,000 miles an hour. It parked itself in front of the left inlet spike going 2,100 miles an hour. It should have been sucked right into this. And recently, we've been hearing about drones. We've been hearing about plasma balls. And I'm going to go to the next slide here. If you look to the left, you can see the arrow. That indicates the point where whatever this thing was, it parked itself right in front of that inlet spike. And with all the air rushing into the air inlet, that thing should have been sucked in there, but that's not what took place. This thing appeared to be under intelligent control. It was basically circling around this blackbird. Very interesting. The mysterious orb parked itself directly in front of the inlet spike of the SR-71. Just incredible, incredible. Let's continue on here. Now, since we're talking about these plasmoids, let's get into some details here. There are some, underline some, who conclude the following. They are a being. They are alive. They are aware. They are responsive. They have senses. They perceive. So this is what some people think that these things actually are. Let's go to the next slide here. So, of course, I started doing some digging here. And you come across this article, Journal of Modern Physics, October 28th, 2024. And I'm not going to read all the technical information here, but just this upper heading. Unidentified anomalous phenomenon, extraterrestrial life, plasmoids, shapeshifters, replicons, thunderstorms, lightning hallucinations, aircraft disasters, ocean sightings. Now, there's a couple of problems with this document. Number one, it is not a peer-reviewed document. Number two, some of the names on this document don't exactly check out. Let me go to the next slide here, and I'm just going to go over some of the quick points here. So it says, as documented by NASA, space shuttle films and detailed in this report, self-illuminating pulsing plasma-like UAP UFO plasmoids have multiple shapes and sizes, are attracted to electromagnetic activity and travel at different velocities from different directions, making 90 to 180 degree turns, as well as colliding, intersecting, and piercing other plasma. Very interesting. Sounds exactly what we're hearing about today. It's very current. Let's go to the next one. What is a plasmoid? A plasmoid is a coherent structure within a plasma. A plasma is an ionized gas. They can occur naturally or they can be formed in a laboratory. Scientists do not suspect that plasmoids are sentient. There are no scientists that suspect that a plasmoid is a sentient being. So I'm just wondering, is there something about these plasmas that we don't quite understand within the scientific community because these things are following these high-speed aircraft? And I also want to highlight that this isn't the first time we've heard about these plasmoid spheres, okay? Let's go back into the newspaper clippings. Newcastle Sun, January 3rd, 1945. Foo Fighters are latest. Washington, Tuesday. Pilots flying over Germany at night report that strange balls of fire are following them around on their missions. They have christened these strange phenomenon Foo Fighters. So this is back in World War II, 1945 timeframe. This is what our allied B-17 and B-24 Liberator pilots were basically encountering on a daily basis here. These same spheres or plasmas or plasmoids. And I know there may be a German contingent to this, but I'm just pointing out that these were seen by our bomber pilots during World War II. Let's continue on. Now, back to our slide presentation with Edward here. The strange object departed the SR-71 when the aircraft reached the vicinity of Beale Air Force Base, home of the SR-71 in Northern California. After submitting his incident report, the pilot was told never to speak of the incident again. So when this Blackbird is getting ready to land at Beale Air Force Base in Northern California, whatever this plasma sphere was, skedaddle out of here. Like another function of intelligent design going on within this plasma sphere. Let's continue on here. Through his multiple contacts, Ed eventually collected approximately 24 accounts of plasma spheres interacting with military aircraft. So this is the first time this has happened. This has been going on for decades here. Beale Air Force Base loses SR-71 spy plane. Since we're on this whole concept of Blackbird, I thought we'd dig down a little bit here. So this is Press Tribune, November 22nd, 1989, the beginning of the closing down of the Blackbird program. Let's continue on here. The Atlanta Constitution, March 11th, 1989. And I've got the two things highlighted here. The Air Force announced last week that it was retiring its aging squadron of super secret Lockheed-built SR-71 Blackbird spy planes, successor to the fabled U-2, because of quote-unquote defense budget priorities. Okay, that's what they're telling us here. Then it goes on, the second part here, the plane still holds world records for jet-powered speed and altitude at 2,193 miles per hour and 85,000 feet. Officials estimate that clipping the Blackbird's wings will save $300 million annually. So that's our number. The Pentagon figured, you know, let's do some cost cutting here. Let's get rid of the Blackbird program, and we'll save ourselves in tax dollars $300 million annually. However, in the bigger picture, in terms of the Pentagon spending, $300 million is absolutely pocket change to the Pentagon. That's equivalent to coffee in the Pentagon. So how do we know this? Because this is our latest report, November 17th, 2024. Pentagon fails seventh audit in a row, unable to fully account for $824 billion in budget. And they're crying about $300 million, and they lost $824 billion. What's wrong with this picture? Let's continue on here. Was there another aerospace asset waiting in the wings that could replace the Blackbird? So let's check back to everybody here. Crypto Alchemist, smash that like button. Michael Schratt is the man. Well, I hope so. We'll give it our best try, but we'll still stay humble. Ashton Forbes is talking about plasma spheres right now too. Yeah, that's like in vogue right now. We've definitely got man-made drones without a question, and we've got plasma spheres concurrently with the drone. So there's two things going on here. We know that. Sweet, I caught alive. Fox Mulder, Humberto, plasma is definitely the new age energy. Okay, good. Let's continue on. The Commercial Appeal, May 4th, 1986. Now take a look at what they say here. Aerospace planes taxi across drawing board. New hybrid engines may hurl commercial jets past Mach 5. And then in this little detail thing, they have New York to Peking in 2 hours. Now I'm going to go to the next slide and blow this up. And here you see the 3 different propulsion systems that they're talking about here. So on the bottom, you've got your standard turbojet. So that's your F-15s, your F-14s, your F-18s. That's your turbojet. Up at the top, you've got your ramjet. So we're now getting into the Pratt & Whitney J-58, which was the propulsion system for the SR-71 Blackbird and the A-12. In the middle, you've got the scramjet, that supersonic combustion ramjet. And we're talking about Mach 5 and above, and we're talking about no moving parts. So if you want something very fast, you need to be within the scramjet parameter here. And the goal of all of this is to have a military asset that can be anywhere in the world in less than 2 hours. That's the goal in all of this. Let's continue on here. Lewis Center helps plan rocket plane. 12-minute New York to Los Angeles flights are foreseen. The plane dealer, December 7th, 1985. So what I'm doing here is I'm setting the stage for the aerospace contractors in the middle of the Reagan administration, that they were already working on this technology. And we've got the Reagan buildup. We're going to talk about this. Let's continue on here. Now, let me bring you to Kelly Johnson. Jim Goodall is a very good friend of mine. He attended a lecture that Kelly Johnson delivered back in 1983. And I'm going to hit you with 2 of the quotes here. Number 1, we have the technology today to travel Mach 16. And then the other one, speed costs money. How fast do you want to go? So if you want to go Mach 3, we can do it. You want to go Mach 6, we can do it. You want to go Mach 16, we can do it. Speed costs money. How fast do you want to go? Now, of course, I had to do some calculations. How fast is Mach 16? Turns out it's 12,276 miles an hour. That gets you within the criteria of anywhere in the world in less than 2 hours. So at the minimum by 83, we could do it. It's just a money issue. We could do it. So the technology is there. Let's continue on here. How is the US military going to get the funding for all these hypersonic aircraft programs? So you've got defense contractors building this. You've got another one over here. They're making test vehicles. Things are going on at the remote test site in Nevada. We've got things going on at Groom Lake going down the runway here. How are you going to pay for all these multi-billion-dollar programs? Well, enter the Reagan defense budget, right? The buildup between 1981 to 1985. We had a 4-year crescendo of absolutely massive military buildup spending within the Reagan administration. Now, which I'm going to get in part 2, but a significant number of classified aerospace programs were funded by siphoning off funding from the Star Wars SDI program. That's how a lot of these things were funded. So basically, if you were a defense contractor back in the early 1980s and you had a new program that you wanted to get it funded, you basically got yourself a blank check and it was funded. That's what they could do back in the Reagan administration. So this is Newsweek, June 8th, 1981. Let's continue on here. Now, back to Edgar Fouche's presentation. He talks about, and you can welcome to follow along on the link I presented in the beginning here. He talks about the Roswell debris. So I'm going to take you to the morning of July 3rd, 1947. Off to the left, you've got Mac Brazel. Off to the right, you've got 7-year-old Timothy D. Proctor. Now, this is the morning of July 3rd, 1947. He talks about 3 different types of debris that were seen on the Foster Ranch. I'm going to go to the next slide here. And our 3 types of debris are as follows. Number 1, we had debris that was very thin tinfoil-like material that could not be cut, could not be burned, could not be dented with a 16-pound sledgehammer. That's number 1. Number 2, we had different types of material that you could crinkle up in your hand. And when you let go, it basically rolled out like liquid mercury and then settled down to the table. That's number 2. Number 3 were various lengths of small cross-section I-beams with hieroglyphic type writing on the inside of one of the walls. That was basically the 3 types of debris. Let's continue on here. Plasma physics, Rosetta Stone for a new source of energy and propulsion. Let's continue on. General Dynamics. So another one of Ed's friends who worked for General Dynamics in Fort Worth, Texas, described a top secret classified program he worked on during the mid-1960s, which involved a plasma accelerator, specifically dealing with gravity warping techniques. So here you've got General Dynamics working on a gravity warping technique program in the mid-1960s. So I wanted to see if I could dig up any evidence to verify any of this. I'm not just going to go on someone's opinion. I want to see if we can verify this. So I started doing some digging here. Now, Ed's contact described working with a foil-like material that consisted of 12 layers of material less than 10,000ths of an inch thick. Very similar to the Roswell debris. It was as flexible as a trash bag, but virtually indestructible. It could not be pierced, burned, or cut. The only way the material could be sliced was when it was super cooled, and then a large electrical charge was then applied. After that, it was cut by sliced with a laser cutter. This material was then used to line the inner portions of the accelerator, which contained the mercury-based plasma. The plasma was then cooled to superconductive temperatures, rotated at 45,000 RPM, and pressurized to 150,000 PSI. Instruments placed within the center of this accelerator exhibited a 50% loss in weight attributed to the reduction of the gravitational field. So in a nutshell, now we're talking about some very exotic technology here. You've got a liquid mercury plasma. You're pressurizing it to very high PSI. Then you're rotating it at 45,000 RPM, and there's a 50% loss in weight. Could that technology be applied to aerospace assets that were procured during the early Reagan administration buildup? That's what we want to talk about. Let's continue on here. So let's do some digging. Wichita Falls Times, July 26, 1964. And it says, search for new energy source 7 years old. And we'll go to the next one here. We'll go to the next slide here. See if I can get this thing to work. Okay. Same article. 10 Texas private electrical companies began the research in a hunt for cheaper electricity and limitless source of power. Joined with them is General Dynamics. So it's beginning to check out here. So Edgar talks about his friend who worked for General Dynamics in the mid-1960s on a gravity warping technology experiment with General Dynamics. This is exactly what this article is talking about here. Their work in 7 years has taken them into the world of plasma physics and into experiments with a bottle whose only sides are a magnetic field. So containing this plasma, yeah, that's what they're doing. Let's continue on here. Northwest Arkansas Times, October 8th, 1971. It says, university adds new members to faculty. I'm going to blow this thing up. Dr. Alan V. Larson, associate professor of physics, who comes to the university from General Atomics Corporation, where the past 2 years he had been group leader of the electromagnetic pulse analysis section from 1961 to 1969. He was with General Dynamics Corporation's Plasma Physics and Propulsion section, serving from 1965 to 1969 as chief of the section. So here's a guy who actually worked on these programs. That's checking out. And then I ran across this article. This is General Dynamics Convair Division, NASA, development of a coaxial plasma gun for space propulsion. I'm going to go to the next one here. So here you can see the inside page. Again, NASA Lewis Research Center, Cleveland, Ohio, the date April 1965. So the documents are verifying what Edgar Fouche was telling us in his 1998 presentation here. All right, let's continue. This is from the Bill Scott collection. New Scientist, October 2000. We're talking about this plasma again here. This is, I think, an interesting article. They can reduce drag, repel shock waves, and make jet fighters vanish. Will plasma start an aerospace revolution, or are they just another mirage? Continue with the article here. But there are more clandestine applications. The way plasmas interact with radio waves around aircraft is causing more than a little excitement in the secret world of military aerospace research. Could they provide the ultimate invisibility shield for stealth aircraft? Hint, hint, hint. Other researchers have found that plasmas can dissipate shock waves from supersonic aircraft stifling troublesome sonic boom. So what are they talking about? They're talking about charged plasmas being used as an invisibility cloak, and they're talking about charged plasmas helping to attenuate sonic boom footprints. Interesting. Let's go on here. So then I got this collection from Bill Scott Collection. This is Electroaerodynamics and Supersonic Flow from the Northrop Corporation. The same corporation made the B-2 stealth bomber. So this is January 22nd to 24, 1968. And this is the front cover inside. I'm going to blow up the abstract on this one so that we can find out what's going on here. The research presented in this paper pertains to the effects of electrostatic fields on a charged flow of fluid about a body. The phenomenon was studied with wind tunnel tests and a hydraulic analogy tests. The results indicate that electrostatic forces can alter the flow pattern of a fluid, and it may be possible to attenuate the sonic boom. In addition, if the sonic boom is decreased, there may also be a wave drag reduction. So again, what they're talking about here is this electroaerostatic charges they're putting on this, attenuating and eliminating the sonic boom footprint. Here's the wind tunnel test results. I'm going to go one more here. So this is back in 1968, they were working on this technology. My question is, using charged plasma fields and electroaerodynamics, the F-22, the F-35, B-2, and B-21 could achieve supersonic flight without causing a sonic boom. Is that what's been going on here under the cover of classified black budget programs, basically procuring from the Reagan buildup? Is that what was going on? Are they making some of these aircraft supersonic with no shockwave, no sonic boom? Is that what they've been doing here? I want to explore this here. Could some of those aircraft be using this technology? $1 trillion train wreck. How the F-35 hollowed out the United States Air Force by Bill Sweetman. Very interesting. We're talking about trillions being poured into the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program. Now, I should mention that my conclusions don't necessarily line up with what Bill Sweetman is talking about, because I like to go kind of on a different slant. I like to take a more documented, well, he's done a good documentation on this, but I take a little bit more of a different approach on this, and we'll think about this. But I just want to say that my results may not necessarily line up with what Bill Sweetman is talking about here. But I want to give him credit for his publication. Burlington Free Press, June 30th, 2013. F-16 plane co-designer to speak in Burlington. So who are we talking about here? Spray calls the F-35 a shockingly bad warplane. So here we have Pierre Spray. The F-35, Spray said, is so poorly conceived that every plane purchased will be a detriment to national defense, both because of its poor design and because its high cost will drain resources from other Pentagon programs. The new plane, which has struggled with design and production issues, is described as the most expensive weapon systems ever built. Can you believe that? Former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates was a critic of the program's expense. Frequent critic Senator John McCain, representative from Arizona, in remarks on the Senate floor in December 2011, pointed to the rapidly rising costs of each plane and of delays in production, and called the F-35 program both a scandal and a tragedy. Wow. Big words, big words. Let's continue on here. Fort Worth Star-Telegram, September 18th, 2018. At home as well as abroad, skepticism of F-35 persists. It says the latest dogfights took place in the past week. A former Pentagon official involved in the development of the F-16, F-18, A-10 aircraft in the 1970s said in influential defense publication that the F-35 is a dog. And they continue on here. Newspapers in Australia, where the government's plans to eventually buy F-35s are subject of intense political debate, reported that the planes were quote unquote clubbed like baby seals in computer simulated war games conducted by the US Air Force. Oh, that doesn't sound good. They were clubbed like baby seals. The wording on this is just really severe here. Is that what's going on? Calgary Herald, March 21st, 2012. U.S. watchdog slams F-35 cost overruns. So a lot of this controversy going on with the F-35. My question is, and this is what I want to raise here, have we all been played for fools regarding the F-35? All this negative press on the F-35 program, was that all a diversionary tactic? Have we all been played here? Did a certain aerospace contractor use the F-35 as a sacrificial lamb to cover the cost of its real capabilities? Is there something very significant and secret about the F-35 that Congress and the American people have not been informed about? That's my question. I mean, they poured over $1 trillion into this thing, and we've got all these reports of problems. And is that all a setup? Have we all been played here? Let me check back into here. Let's see. Ad Astra recordings, counter-rotating magnetic fields. Yes. Occam's razor. Some of this describes a bubble outside of time of field. Yep, that checks out. Field propulsion craft. Running costs and maintenance requirements of F-35 are insane. Yep, that is correct. Tarek Reed, OG Tarek from Philly. Salute Michael Schratt. Smash the like button. Cool, good, with you. All right, let's continue on here. Now, these are a collection of quotes from President Donald Trump, okay? You can't see them. The F-35 jet, which is almost like an invisible fighter, even if it's right next to it, it can't see it. It's very tough to beat a plane when you can't see it. Nobody has the equipment that we have. So this is President Trump. Does he know something about the F-35 that we don't know about when he says you can't see them? Is he only talking about radar stealth, or is he talking about something else here? Is that what he's talking about? Is the invisibility cloak depicted in the Lord of the Rings series strictly fantasy, or has the technology progressed to make it a reality and integrate it into the 5th and 6th generation stealth aircraft? Is that what's going on here? Let me continue on here. In other words, is Wonder Woman's invisible jet just a pipe dream? Is it just science fiction, or is there something else going on here? Let's continue on. So then I ran across this document. Interesting. The Cheshire Jet, harnessing metamaterials to achieve an optical stealth capability. Timothy E. Beers, Major U.S. Air Force, Air Command and Staff College. Optical stealth capability. Interesting. Let's go on. How cloaking works. To make something invisible, the nature of visibility must be understood. Electromagnetic radiation can have wavelengths from thousands of kilometers to tiny fractions of the size of an atomic nucleus. Specifically, and of the interest to this discussion, visible light consists of relatively high frequency short wavelengths, 10 to the 14th minus or 10 to the 15th hertz, and 400 and 750 nanometers, respectively. We see objects in this spectrum because light is absorbed by and reflected off matter, which in turn hits our eyes. So they're talking about the visible light spectrum. That's what they're talking about here. That's the key to this here. Let's continue on. This research will characterize the recent advances in metamaterials. So that keeps on popping up. Edgar Fouche talked about metamaterials in his presentation and highlight both the benefits and challenges to U.S. Air Force for obtaining an optical stealth capability. Conclusions drawn from this research will help shape DoD investments and metamaterials. So now they're talking about metamaterials being involved in conjunction with an optical stealth capability. That's what these documents are telling us. Let's continue on here. Metamaterials and transformation optics. This is Air Force Research Laboratory, July 2011. And in their publication here, they've got these charts and graphs. The figure in the lower half of the plane shows the scattering from a 3D cloak. And you can get into all the equations if you want to. Now, I got to be honest with you. I can't understand all the theoretical physics and all the equations going on, but I try to understand what's going on below those with the text, and that's what I want to highlight here. Constitutive parameters of metamaterial structures used for invisible cloak realization. So this is back in October 2013, Air Force Research Laboratory. So again, second paper talking about optical stealth capability. Let's continue on. Now, within that publication, you've got these diagrams, and you can go through this entire publication document, and it goes into the interworking experiments on what they discovered with this cloaking device. Let's continue. Metamaterials' new invisibility cloaks make fighter jets invisible. Some metamaterials can bend visible light, infrared radiation, through a novel optical material that effectively means they could act as an invisibility device. According to the CCTV broadcast, those materials are now being manufactured by an assembly line and will be used to help further China's aviation industry. So here you've got China working on this. We have America working on this. What are metamaterials? In this case, we're talking about composite metals and plastics that use artificial geometry to influence the wavelengths in electromagnetic radiation, as well as elastic waves and sounds. Some metamaterials built using nanotechnology can also be used as super strength materials. In fact, optical metamaterials have already been used to demonstrate invisibility by redirecting visible light around itself to avoid reflection. Hence their frequent reference to the popular fiction of cloaking in Star Wars, Star Trek, and Harry Potter. So here again, this metamaterials, electromagnetic type visible light spectrum, and optical cloaking with stealth. Let's continue on here. New metamaterial yields invisibility for aircraft and drones. Electrical engineers from the University of California have created a new ultra-thin metamaterial that could provide a cloaking device and make UAVs, in other words, drones, invisible. The new material creates invisibility and leaves no electronic, infrared, or visual signatures for enemies to detect. So is that partially what's going on that we've been seeing the last couple of weeks? Are they using UAVs and drones with this technology where they're coming in and out and they're cloaking? Is that what is actually going on here? Let's continue on. By scattering electromagnetic radiation in the visible, infrared, or radar spectrum, such metamaterial will be able to render a coded object undetectable in these wave frequencies by forcing light or radar waves to bypass the object's surface through coding, which effectively cloaks the object. Absolutely. Let's check in here. Crypto alchemist, I make metamaterials, shape-shifting metals, drones. What about on-condition time travel? Perhaps. Let's continue on here. Now you see it, now you don't. Blinding us with science, the next generation of stealth. Researchers are examining ways to blur an aircraft's outline by using a recently created branch of nanotechnology known as metamaterials. This thing keeps popping up. This is something that I think we all should be familiar with. The advancements in metamaterials are key to the understanding here. Ordinary metals, plastics, and other materials are combined in a way that alters their response to light, heat, radio waves, and other forms of electromagnetic radiation. In particular, researchers discovered that metamaterials can bend light in ways that no naturally occurring material can do, even backwards. It's that ability that could allow a coating of metamaterials to smear an airplane's outline. That's it right there. That's it right there. Using metamaterials to bend light to smear an aircraft's outline. Oh, that's it. That is it. That is essentially what we're talking about here. Metaskin truly cloaks objects' form for radar. Over the past few years, we've seen incremental advancements in cloaking devices and materials. There was a biocompatible silk-based material for invisibility in the terahertz range, plus the neat light manipulating lens system for seeing through objects. So again, they're talking about this type technology. It's all within this documentation. Now, from Star Wars to Star Trek to science, BAE Systems' latest offering, BAE Systems Invisibility Cloak. BAE Systems' latest offering, the Adaptive Invisibility Cloak, follows the high-tech active camouflage model, concentrating on masking the infrared spectrum in a unique way. It also holds the potential to extend this ability into other parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. So what I'm doing here is I'm laying the groundwork that in point of fact, yes, we've got technical documents, we've got Air Force Research Laboratory, we've got scientific papers talking about this stealth cloaking, optical cloaking technology here. Could military planes be getting invisibility cloaks? Air Force General calls on defense industry to develop Star Wars style device. A general in the U.S. Air Force is calling on industry to develop cloaking devices inspired by Star Trek to protect his fleet of tankers and cargo planes. The technology could alter the plane's radar image so it appears to be in a different location or is hidden altogether. That's the perfect wording. It's the perfect wording. Let's continue on here. So where am I going with all of this, right? There's got to be a reason why I'm presenting these articles. We'll do a quick check-in. Let's see. Should check out my Metamaterials. I make aerogel. Oh, okay, good. I also make nanotube nanoatomic structure. Excellent. So where am I going with all this? Okay. Let me bring you the attention of this email that I got from a gentleman. I will not release his name. I will not release his contact info. So we'll keep this under wraps. This is a couple of years ago. This is what he writes. Michael, so I talked to a worker at Hill Air Force Base and he gave me a tip. I pursued it as far as I can. You have better sources and contacts, so I want to pass it on to you. He said the F-35 has a big secret, and he pointed me to a quote by President Trump's comments on, quote, "We have invisible jets." What he told me was that he wasn't talking about radar invisibility. That was all he gave me. It's not electrochromic paneling, but has to do with laser machine coatings of metamaterials and a gold sphere applied to the top of billions of micro-pyramidal shapes. Then a charge is applied across the coating of the aircraft, and what I suspect happens is it creates an optical invisibility above a certain altitude. Hopefully that's a good tip for you to follow. Maybe you can confirm it. Well, the articles that we just talked about were dealing with metamaterials, coatings, optical stealth capabilities. So this person who is a worker at Hill Air Force Base, this is checking out. It's checking the boxes here. Let's continue on. This is the same source. He had an interesting encounter that I want to bring everyone's attention. And we'll go through this relatively quickly here. Michael Schratt, I need your help. I'm so completely baffled by what I encountered yesterday. I just don't know where to start. This was not a UFO, but a jet that was exhibiting very strange counterintuitive features and technology. First, I need to explain where I live and what I was doing when I had the encounter. I live roughly 1.5 miles away as the crow flies from Hill Air Force Base in South Ogden, Utah. I was out jogging. There's a trail roughly 1/2 mile directly north of the base and the landing approach runway. This trail follows along I-84. You can look on Google Earth to see what I'm talking about. It's down a little canyon. If you don't know Hill Air Force Base, well, it sits on a hill, hence the name, I think. So here's the crux of the story. I was running directly west along this path. The sun was going down, but it was still light. I was running through AM areas of trees when I heard a sound that sounded like two rather large electric engines. I'm sure you know the sound I'm talking about. As I got into a clearing, I saw two jets hovering at no more than 150 feet off the ground between the center dividing line of the highway. There wasn't any traffic, so I could clearly hear and see these two jets. The divider line is about 25 to 50 yards wide. What threw me off is the jets did not sound like jets, and I'm very familiar with the jets at Hill. These two were absolutely not F-35s. Because they clearly had two engines on each aircraft. They were so close to the ground that I could see the pilots making hand gestures. They were clearly talking to each other. This jet looked like a more sleek version of the F-22. Lower profile, smooth, rounded edges, looked smaller and more compact, but I'm not sure of the actual size comparison. So it gets more strange. They were hovering, making a higher pitch electrical-like sound, not typical jet engines. The thrust vectored nozzles were not pointed down. I'll repeat, they absolutely were not pointed down. This left me really scratching my head. They sat there for about 1.5 minutes hovering. I was kicking myself because I had forgot my phone back in my gym bag in the trunk of the car. I had left the gym and went to go on my daily running. It gets even more crazy, whether you want to believe this or not. I'm still here doubting what I saw, but it was definitely getting lower light, obviously still visible, but I could have sworn that there was a bluish hue around the craft, but I don't know whether it was because of the lighting or I just don't know. Either way, what do you make of this? Have you heard of anything similar? All right, so in a nutshell, this contact lives near Hill Air Force Base in Utah. He's going on this jog, and then he comes across what looks like very advanced, sleek versions of the F-22. They did not have their thrust vectoring nozzles pointed down. It's kind of like in Harrier mode, but they're not Harriers, and they're not F-22s, like a much more advanced one. Now, they were two of them side by side, hovering about 150 feet off the ground. They were making an electrical noise, not a jet noise. So that's in a nutshell what this guy's talking about. Now, in the public domain, we don't know of any advanced F-22s that can hover, but within the black world was something being tested at Hill Air Force Base. So, of course, I didn't leave it here. I asked this gentleman, can you draw for me a rough pencil sketch? I mean, tell me what this thing looked like. Show me. I want to know what it was look like. And so he did. So here's his drawing here. And this tracks with something else. Now you can see he's got this line going around the outer profile of the craft. He says blue hue, very subtle blue hue. We'll go to the next one here. And now you can see them side by side. They were hovering 150 feet off the ground right next to Hill Air Force Base. So I wanted to see, can we do a color rendering of this thing? So I came up with this. Now it's probably not perfect, but just gives you an idea what this thing actually looks like. We go on and use his sketch as a guide, and we go into what the military industrial complex defense aerospace contractors are actually doing. And you come up with this. This is like one-to-one comparison to the original witness sketch. It's tracking. So something like this apparently was seen near Hill Air Force Base. Let's continue on here. Now, back to Edgar's presentation. YB-49 Edwards Air Force Base. From 1973 to 1976, Ed worked on aircraft programs at Edwards Air Force Base. The B-2 stealth bomber was tested at Edwards Air Force Base. Let's check in here. I live in a base housing at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and I was outside about 2 weeks ago, and I saw this exact craft. Sounds much different than a normal jet. Okay, so we got a secondary source now that apparently saw something very similar, and it wasn't making a jet noise. So now we got independent confirmation. No telling what they test and fly. Absolutely. Do these craft have weapons? Do you think of some type? I'm sure they do have weapons. Laser rays, yes, a YF-23 or that notoriously public shy YF something. Yeah, okay, good. Recovered craft, according to witnesses, cannot be weaponized and cannot be piloted. Perhaps. A skin made from micro LEDs or similar, this is Roger Pierce, a similar tech actively cooled from behind might offer effective infrared invisibility with projection of a variety of outward appearances, even no glasses 3D. Okay, good, let's continue on here. Now, the B-2 stealth bomber was rolled out November 22nd, 1988. Some of the newspaper reporters that were invited to the rollout, and this is the B-2 stealth bomber, November 23rd, 1988, this is the newspaper clipping. When they wrote their report, they said that the stealth bomber, Darth Vader in shoulder pads. That's how this was described. Others described it as Darth Vader peeking over a fence. And it does look like Darth Vader peeking over a fence. So just demonstrating what, this very early revealing of the B-2, that's what this thing actually looks like. Now we move on to Northrop Grumman B-21 Raider. Official rollout December 2nd, 2022. Let's continue on here. Los Angeles Times, December 3rd, 2022. New B-21 Raider makes its grand debut. Okay. Now, if anyone's interested in this kind of research, I highly recommend going to Air Force Plant 42 Blackbird Park and then going up to Edwards Air Force Base, where you can drive all the way down. So if you take the 14 north, you go past Palmdale, you go past Lancaster, you take a right turn, you're heading toward Edwards Air Force Base. And just before you get to the entry gate, you as a public citizen, you have every right to go right up to that area. They have something called Century Circle there, where they have the F-104, they have different F-102, F-106, different aircraft that you can walk around. But on the way to Edwards Air Force Base, and this was seen there before, you've got this absolutely huge Northrop Grumman billboard sign here, and it says, "It's detectable until it's not." It's detectable until it's not. I wonder what that means. Are they talking about detectable in stealth, as it being a stealth aircraft? Or are they talking about something more going on than just low observability here? What is Northrop Grumman trying to tell us? Are they only referring to radar stealth? Let's go on to the next slide here. That brings us to Invisible Aircraft, Popular Science, May 1997. And what are they talking about? They're talking about daytime stealth technology, using electrochromic panels, taking an image of what's in back of the aircraft, electronically transferring it onto the top side, allowing it to blend in with its background. That's what they're talking about there. We're discussing technologies where you don't have to wait for the sun to go down, like in Desert Storm. Now we can do the same missions in the daytime. So let's go into what they talk about here. This is the blow up article. Disappearing Act. Future stealth aircraft, such as Lockheed Martin's proposed Joint Strike Fighter, in other words, the F-35, might use visual stealth to blend into the sky. Sensors would measure the sky's brightness and hue, and electrochromic coatings applied over a white skin would change shade to match the background. That's exactly what we're talking about here. So back to Edgar's presentation. Other aircraft tested at Edwards is the XB-70 1964. Continue on. Edgar worked on the following aircraft programs. So F-111, F-15, A-10, F-16, and B-1. So instead of me just telling you what the programs he worked on, let me show you the programs that he actually worked on. So we have the F-111. This was a controversial aircraft. Overweight, underpowered. They had congressional hearings about this. There was a lot of battles going on in Congress, but let me hit you with the quote here. There isn't enough thrust in Christendom to fix this plane. 3-star U.S. Navy Admiral Thomas Connally during 1968 congressional hearing. So, I still like the F-111. It's retired now, but interesting aircraft. Let's continue on. Now, Ed did a lot of work on the F-15 Eagle. Next slide. He worked on the F-16 Fighting Falcon. Next slide. He worked on the A-10 Warthog. We'll continue on here. He worked on the B-1 bomber. So these are different programs that Ed had worked on. In the summer of 1976, Ed moved to Nellis Air Force Base and spent 3.5 years working on F-15 electronic countermeasure equipment. So this was a lot of what he was involved in. Now, eventually, he got a call to go to Area 51 Groom Lake. And you can track this all with Edgar's PowerPoint, his slide presentation. Ed maintained a top secret crypto clearance and spent time working at Area 51. Let's continue on here. Now, what was a daily schedule? Ed would wake up at 4:30 in the morning and board a blue-colored Air Force bus with blacked out windows, which would take him to Area 51. There were 28 other people on the bus, including 2 security guards with M16s and a bus driver. All personnel on the bus were specifically given 3 words: do not speak. So you've got this highly oppressive environment in this bus with blacked out windows. You've got 2 security guards there pointing with M16s, and you don't know exactly where you're going. But you can see how this oppressiveness, when you're working on these programs, and these guys don't play around. You're not allowed to talk to anyone on these rides. So this is what Edgar's involved in here. Now, so August 17th, 2013, CIA admits Area 51 exists. So from all this time in the past up to 2013, they've finally acknowledged that Area 51 exists. But we only heard this back in 2013. So for all these years, all these people who worked at Mercury, who took the bus, and then other locations around the Nevada test site. They would bus themselves in, but they couldn't talk about what they were working on, where they were working on it, all up until 2013 when they finally acknowledged the existence of Area 51. Let's continue on. Now, if anyone wants to get a very good handle on exactly what's going on at Area 51 and get the entire historical legacy about the base, the beginning, Lockheed's involvement, Kelly Johnson, test pilots, classified programs, Peter Merlin has done the absolute best publication on Area 51 called Dreamland, The Secret History of Area 51. This is about a 3.5-inch thick volume. It's 5 pounds. It's absolutely excruciatingly well lit. So I want to give credit to Peter Merlin for anyone who's interested. Let's continue on. U-2 spy planes. We're talking about programs being tested at Groom Lake. U-2 spy plane first flight took place Area 51 on August 1st, 1955. SR-71 first flight at Area 51 on December 22nd, 1964. Let's continue on. HAFB first flight, Area 51 on December 1st, 1977. So this is the precursor technology demonstrator prototype to the full-scale development F-117 stealth fighter program. This is a 3/4 front view looking on the bottom of the aircraft, and we've got the control tower. You've got the Groom Lake mountains in the background, and we've got the chase plane off the left wing of the HAFB prototype. Now, when HAFB vehicle number 1 and HAFB air vehicle number 2 crashed, they were buried at the test site, never to be seen by human eyes again. And so we have the burying of the HAFB prototypes. They're gone. We're never going to see them again. Now, how do we know this? How can we prove this? Because Elko Daily Free Press, April 5th, 2001, secrets buried at Area 51. So you've got classified aircraft programs buried at Area 51. You've got aerospace assets that didn't quite turn out the way they wanted to, and they swept the funding and the program under the carpet. They buried those. They buried the flight suits that the pilots wore on these programs. They buried those. And then they took technical engineering documents and 3-ring binders associated with classified programs. They dug these entirely huge long trenches at the test site, and they threw radar absorbent material with toxic chemicals into these pits. They poured diesel fuel inside these burn pits, and they started burning all of this. You've got the radar absorbent materials, you've got the chemicals and coatings, you've got the aircraft in there, you've got the 3-ring binders with all the technical documents. They burned all of it up. And that's this smoke that was hovering over the residential area, causing all sorts of lawsuits. We've already heard about this, but just backing up what was going on here. So secrets buried at Area 51, Elko Daily Press, April 5th, 2001. Let's continue on. Now, on the lower left, you've got HAFB. On the upper right, you've got the F-117 stealth fighter. Now, you can see some similarities here, but the inward canted vertical stabilizers are going toward the center line. F-117 kind of has them going out, and it's a bigger aircraft. So just showing you the difference between the two programs here. Let's continue on. F-117 first flight at Area 51, June 18th, 1981. We're talking about ancient history here now. These programs are so legacy now, and we're wondering, are there any programs that have been procured, designed, tested, and flown at Groom Lake that have never been dislodged or released into the public domain? We want to talk about that. Let's check in. Wayne, thank you for all your hard work on the topic. I thoroughly enjoy your presentations. Thanks, Wayne. Cods and Mayhem. Do you know why they named it Janet? Joint Air, I don't remember the acronym. Mark Z. Hammer. I suspect after someone's daughter. Okay, possible. Salute Michael, Metal Hedrix. Occam's Razor. Janet stands for just another non-existence terminal. Yeah, that's good. I like that. Let's continue on. Now, this is another Edgar Fouche slide, and he was kind of bringing out the point that, yes, the F-117 does look like a flying saucer in a front view silhouette. Let's continue on here. How did Lockheed secretly transport the F-117 from the Skunk Works building at Burbank Airport to Groom Lake? Now, what I've got here is a top view, aerial view looking down of Burbank Airport. This is the former location of Skunk Works before they moved it up 94, 95 to Palmdale. If you look at the right of the picture where I have the white star, that's where the Skunk Works hangars used to be. So that's where all this went down. So how did they move the F-117 from Burbank up to Groom Lake? Well, in the Macon Telegraph, December 14th, 1986, it's a dark secret in California skies. So what this article talks about is the massive C-5 transport cargo aircraft would land on Friday nights late at night at Burbank Airport. Then it would taxi up onto the tarmac near the Skunk Works hangar. All the lights would be extinguished in the Skunk Works hangar. And then they had two 18-wheeler tractor trailer trucks, one on either side, that were used as perimeter blocking screens so that people on the chain link fence that were looking into the area could not see what was going on. And they started loading sections of the F-117, the forward fuselage sections, the wings of the craft, and then other wooden cradles and crates were specifically designed to carry and house other components that were loaded into the C-5. So let's go on to the next slide. You can see here's the C-5 with the cargo bay door opened up. They brought all the F-117 components in this thing. A C-5 cargo aircraft would land at Burbank Airport at 10 p.m. on Friday nights. Upon arrival, all lights associated with the Skunk Works building were turned off. The C-5 would taxi up to the aircraft hangar, and two 18-wheeler trucks would provide cover to protect the loading of the F-117 from prying eyes stationed along the airport's chain link fence. That's exactly what was going on here. What other top secret aircraft have been flight tested at Area 51? And I think at this point, we will conclude part one of this presentation. And on the next presentation, I want to go into what other aircraft may have been tested at Groom Lake. We're going to get into the two-stage to orbit space plane Dark Star program, Black Star program. We'll talk about Edgar Fouche's TR-3B and the historical legacy of that. And then I'm going to wrap that up with a never before seen full color illustrations of the TR-3B by my good friend Joseph Wraith. So I want to thank you for everyone being with me. I'm going to go do a final check-in here. Carl, hello. Tuning in late. Good to see you, Michael. Wow, almost 200 washing. Wow, I've never had 200. Okay, great video. Great. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to Sweden. Didn't Ebb claim to have been at S4? He talks about S4. Third phase of moon. Thanks, third phase of moon. So everyone have a good holiday season. We'll check back with you. We'll do a part two, and we'll have some world exclusive surprises for you. Thank you, everybody.